even the farthest reaches of the Alpha Quadrant, one cannot escape the grasp of Child Protective Services here on V'ger Please, a vile visit to Bajor. My name is Joseph.
Dear Reddit, am I the asshole for grabbing a handsome young man's shoulder? I'm your co-host, Peter.
Peter, I wanted to talk a bit about revenue generation for the V'ger
let me
Please
tell you.
adventure. Okay.
Joe.
Okay.
Now, you listen to a lot of podcasts, and this is great news for everybody out there that's listening to us. I'm excited to tell you about Helix Sleep. And would you believe it? We have no contracts with them. No one's giving us any fucking money here, Joe. Big corpo bills are not going in our pocket. No, we're doing things the old-fashioned way.
On one hand, I wish we were big enough to be able to afford to pay our podcast bills by shilling some sort of delightful mattress-related product to all of you, because it would just ease the burden that we ask of our listeners.
Quit our jobs and sell out.
On the other hand, there's something I think maybe endearing about the fact that we come to you with a bit of a tin cup and say, hey, could you help us pay for our hosting costs? But we talk about it so rarely. I feel that maybe now is a moment to remind everybody we actually have a Patreon. Peter and I, we're fortunate souls. We have real jobs. We're not trying to do this to generate any real money for ourselves. It really is so that we can pay for hosting costs, our broadcasting software, and then a little bit more so that we can do things like pay for new key art like we did for season 2, and for DS9, and pay for theme songs and that sort of thing. So we've recently put up some new content on our Patreon. We did a review of the short film of Unification that you may have heard of up there recently. We're going to continue to do Trek movie reviews. We got Star Trek 5 and 6 at a minimum to do before we close out kind of the OG Trek movies, before we might move on to other things like, say, Fallout, or maybe even Kindred the Embraced. So, and there is an exclusive piece of Patreon content, not just some of our little rants here and there, but also a review of Tank Girl, which will never, ever be released anywhere else except to paying customers. So if you've enjoyed the show, if you've been listening, please consider going to www.patreon.com/VegerPlease and subscribing to our Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Our costs have increased such that I wanted to encourage people to think about giving us $3 a month so that we can keep this kind of revenue neutral between Peter and I. So if you can't, or you don't, it's not in your budget, I totally understand. We're not trying to make money off of this. We're just really trying to defray our costs. So if that's something you could do, please, again, www.patreon.com/VegerPlease. Give it a look. We would appreciate it. You know what else is something that we appreciate?
People that keep their hands to themselves.
We appreciate Deep Space Nine here. And as a consequence, what episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine did we review this week?
Season 2, Episode 5, Cardassians, written by James Crocker, story by Gene Woland, and John Wright, directed by Cliff Boyle. In universe date, now there's again not really star dates here. It's just sometime 2370.
Well, I guess there is a station log at the end that gives a star date. So you have a range of dates here.
Well, I can't remember my wife's phone number, so yeah, I'm not going to fuck around with star dates.
I shout out to Enterprise for having the most sensible dating structure ever by just using March 22nd.
Yeah, how am I supposed to know how close this is to my birthday? I don't know what star date I was born on. This could have been a real shit episode. These little, the children quandaries. And the fact that this kid's, who's he going to go home with, was like the B plot to the A plot of Garak versus Dukat. Perfect.
Every plot in DS9 is improved by the presence of Garak. Garak is like what's that spice that you put on everything? Or the Frank's Red Hot?
Sure.
Like,
Well, you're from the Mid-Atlantic at times, so I guess you could go with Old Bay.
it's true. He is the Old Bay of
He even looks like a
DS9.
crustacean.
You sprinkle it on, it's just better. It's just better. And yeah, like actually I was talking with one of our fans, a fellow by the name of Andrew, who has been listening to us since our Voyager days. So he said something to me that I really appreciated. He said, Garak speaks in italics.
He does. My wife said, what episode, do you think your podcast, did you watch an episode that'll be good for your podcast? And I said, yeah, it really heavily features this guy named Garak, who's like this spy pretending to be, or, posing as a tailor. And she's like, is he a good character? And I'm like, oh, he's great. And she's like, well, tell me about him. And I start trying to like tell her about this guy. And at the same time, I realize that everything I'm saying sounds real stupid. Oh, he's like a spy, but he's posing as a tailor. And she's like, well, do people know he's a spy, or is just the audience? I'm like, no, everybody knows he's a spy, but he's like a good guy spy. And he's real handsy, and he's kind of flirty with the, like, okay, if you at home, just go ahead and write up on a piece of paper things to describe him, and then look down and say, should this be a character that works?
Or did I just describe a sexual predator? Like, what have I done?
Yes, absolutely. I think you did. But is this a interesting character that you want more of frequently? I don't know how you frame this guy on paper to seem delightful and amazing, but they're on the screen watching him portray it, like right up there with Nana Vista. Like, I think this is the only time I'm really going to be on front of a camera in a meaningful way. And how do I make sure that people, was this first aired 93? I'm going to make sure that people 20, 30, fucking 60 years later, sitting in their basement talking to people out in Radioland, appreciate what I'm doing here. And dude's got it figured out. This was
a hit role of a lifetime for him. He did not have a prolific acting career aside from this. I will point out, like, Andrew Robinson is in his 80s now. He's an old man. And he was just a work-a-day kind of like making it an LA guy before this role came around. This is it. This is his thing that he did. He even wrote a book, a Star Trek novel about Garak. Like, it got to that level. Like,
again, what did we say in the first episode? Like, the one with the Duras sisters. He looked at the character notes for this, threw them away, and then pulled out his 20-year-old D&D campaign. It's like,
no, I know who this guy should be. Just
Garak.
Believe me.
Okay, we'll call him Garak, but just so you guys know, I'm actually running Fafnir, my bard from a D&D campaign I started back in junior high. Like, I know this guy better than myself.
He really comes into his own in season 2 is when you start to get like real content with him, backstory, you get to really know him, and it's really off to the races from this point. I think he's in at least 3 episodes this season, because he was only in the one in season 1. He was in the second episode and we didn't see him again.
Yes.
And so they figured out, oh, we got to have more of this guy. And this is the first time I feel like you really get to know what Garak is about, because it's just so petty. This episode is about how much he fucking hates Gul Dukat. At its core, he fucking hates that man. And this is not the last time we hear about this.
It's delightful. And, listening to you talk about it, the impression that I'm getting through these episodes is that somebody who has some juice over there in executive producer land, or someone in a high up position, A, gives a fuck, and B, is watching these episodes as a fan of what's happening and taking their own notes and saying, oh, this guy was awesome. I want more of this. That's a plot line that seems like there's a lot to explore. Let's put that on the board to do things. And like, I feel like there's a fan level appreciation within a creative capacity, and they are steering the show based on what they have been watching the show do. Whereas Voyager just felt like they had some fucking bangers that nobody ever bothered watching.
Yeah.
And it was just a deaf production team that didn't care, or I don't know what, but just didn't seem
They had
cognizant.
guardrails on them. You know, they just kind of like felt very rigid. Famously so, like when we talked about the one time Ethan Phillips tried to get a line changed in an episode, and it was like pulling teeth, and he never asked to do it again. This just feels so much different. It feels like an actor's television show, and you feel that when you get these. This episode is really about the relationship between Bashir and Garak, and Dukat, and the like underlying tension that seems to be in place in regards to Cardassian politics, and the Federation presence on Deep Space Nine is almost like a sideshow. It's almost just like a vector by which the story is being told.
Mhm.
And also, this episode begins to highlight something that I think is an underrated, unspoken element of Deep Space Nine overall, and it's that Julian Bashir is one of the most important characters to the show. He has the most pivotal relationships. His relationship with Garak ends up being key. His relationship with O'Brien ends up being key. His own personal journey that he goes on when it comes to his genetic engineering is key. And it's kind of crazy how much they end up putting on what otherwise would seem like kind of a pointless side character, or at least a tertiary side character, you know, like Crusher. Crusher was forgotten a lot in TNG. Bashir is a key factor to everything that happens story-wise in DS9.
Let's go through the doctors real quick. Bones, critical.
Sure.
Crusher and Pulowski, tertiary. Everything you just said about Julian. EMH, arguably the best.
He's the best character, but he's definitely not the most important.
No, but in terms of like episodes you cared about and like plot lines you cared about, and I think a big part of that is
I'm not. It's not just. I don't even think Julian Bashir is someone you care about. I'm saying he's important to the meta plot.
Well, then that trims that list down considerably. I mean, we really liked Phlox, but I wouldn't say Phlox was important.
Key. Yeah.
I mean, he did damn an entire planet to slow death of space aids.
It beat the Borg in the 22nd century.
Fucking
With the power of just being Denoblian, apparently.
Yeah.
It was the secret all along. But
all right.
Enough faffing about. So this episode begins with Garak not knowing how to keep his hands to himself.
No, this episode begins with the ugliest coat I've ever seen in Star Trek. This businessman associate, which is like an ugly coat in its own regard, and then someone went to a garage sale and bought a bunch of crap and glued it all over this coat.
Just like cell phone batteries, just all over. Yeah.
Old calculators, new calculators, broken cell phones, decks of playing cards. I think that I saw a Super Nintendo cartridge on there.
Boxes, just boxy things.
That's a lot. He basically took apart Batman's utility belt. He said this would look better as a coat, and he just made a whole coat out of gadgets. It's Julian sitting down with Garak in a very pointed conversation by Julian, who's trying to be smug and clever with Garak, and Garak just dancing around all of these specific questions that Julian's trying to get answered.
And to be fair, Garak isn't really trying to hide very much that he's a spy, and he never has. Even from the one episode we had in season 1 with him, he was very much clearly a spy to the point where he told Cisco, I'm pretty sure this guy's a spy. And Cisco's like, yeah, he sounds like he sure is. Like, the book is open on Garak to a degree. This man is clearly involved in clandestine shit. How, where, what exactly is his loyalty? All of this is to be determined. But is he a spy? Answer is yes. Right. But is he a spy that's like for Cardassia? What is going on here? Like, that's not exactly clear yet.
I want to start seeing Garak get involved with Quark, because they seem like they should be in the same. They should be in the same office complex. So he's just kind of like, yeah, he's talking italics, like not disproving anything, but just making it very clear that you're not going to get a firm yes or a firm no out of this guy for many reasons. When suddenly Garak's attention is pulled away by what we will find out is a handsome young man.
Oh, and he loves a handsome young man.
Cardassian makeup does not look good on a kid. This guy looks like a mop handle wearing a bucket for a head. And
yeah, the proportions are off in a way that, like, is it just because he's younger? I don't know. The makeup chair just didn't quite get it right. But regardless, there is a Cardassian young man and a Bajoran older man that show up on the station, led by Super Nintendo guy. Super Nintendo guy sits him down at the replimat in front of Garak. Garak's like, holy shit, another Cardassian, and it's a kid, and he's got a Bajoran earring on, and he's with a Bajoran. This is weird. He gives him a nasty look, so Garak can't help himself, stands up, for some reason puts his fucking hand on this kid's shoulder, talks about how beautiful he is. And apparently this is such an unwanted advance that he just Mike Tyson's his hand immediately. Just digs in with the teeth.
Real lukewarm take. This kid did the right thing.
Stranger fucking danger.
The only way that could have looked worse.
Middle name.
Only way that situation could have looked worse is if Garak had come out of the voyeur vent.
I love Garak, but he does definitely give off this man is a sexual predator vibes to the maximum degree possible.
Garak definitely came out of an ice cream truck before he put a hand on.
After we've had our little adventure in Bite Town, the rest of the episode begins. We get through the intro, and sure enough, Dr. Bashir rolls into ops and is like, hey guys, you won't believe what just happened. Garak totally had his hand bitten while we're at the replimat.
Best line of the whole show is O'Brien very salty commenting, he always cuts the pants too long.
It's like clearly someone attacked him because he's shitty at his job.
Yeah. We've already gone over like replicators, post-scarcity society, utopia, all that other stuff. Like, what do we want to say about this as far as Deep Space Nine goes? That the replicators just aren't good enough, or that, there's still a desire within the Federation for a quality handmade product?
But there's probably something to the idea of someone making something for you to your specifications.
Even if the pants are too long.
That's valued, like that people want to entertain the idea of manual labor, expert ability.
Fair enough.
Retaining that capacity to do those things is important.
You're saying that communist rations just lacked that capitalist edge?
Let me put it this way. There is a difference to me between getting a restaurant cooked food and cooking the food yourself. And I don't know what it is, but the burgers I make at home are better than the burgers I buy from other places.
You must not be fond of spit.
I must not have developed a taste for it, but
it's like cilantro.
But I like the timing that they establish in this episode early on to tell you something fucky is happening. The Bashir's like, oh man, it's this weird experience. There's this fucking Cardassian kid here and bit Garak. Odo's like, that sounds weird. I'm just gonna leave immediately. I'm gonna go investigate this off screen.
I'm going to clue you in. I didn't read this in the wiki because the wiki is another 80-page monstrosity. The reason there is because Odo had actually just watched 28 Days Later, and he's very apprehensive about reports of biting.
Yeah. He's got he's on a zombie kick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a Trillium D scare of 2000 or whatever the Enterprise time frame was.
Immediately after Odo leaves, they get a message. Gul Dukat's calling. Cisco's like, that's weird. I'll see what he wants. And he goes into his office and he strategically does a cool guy sitting on his desk thing. Turns on his screen. And Dukat's like, I understand Garak just had his hand bitten on your station. He's like, how the fuck do you know that? I just found out about it and I run this place.
Well, my reports here say that last season you told Bashir, yeah, sure sounds like a spy. So, maybe he works for me. I don't know. How do you think he found out?
So Cisco's left with this very open question of like, okay, what the fuck is going on in my station that Gul Dukat knows immediately once the one guy, the Cardassian here, gets his fucking hand bitten, and sends Bashir off to investigate the matter further, including talking to the Bajoran dad of this Cardassian kid. Oh, I guess it is important. Kira mentions in just a very throwaway but important piece of dialogue that this kid very well may have been a war orphan. So a bunch of orphaned Cardassians were left behind on Bajor after the end of the occupation. And they were likely left there because, as we'll find out over the course of this episode, Cardassians are extraordinarily family motivated as a society. But if your parents are dead, as a kid, you have no legal status. So family is important, but the existing continuity of that family is what provides you legitimacy, which I think is a very interesting, specific choice to make. Which means orphans have no rights because they're unclaimed by people and no one cares about them, but living parents obsess about family and tradition and having their children present. And as we'll find out, there could be 4 generations of a Cardassian family living under one roof.
Feels very survival of the fittest.
Feels very authoritarian, pseudo-communist like China, if you really think about it.
We'll find out later on that Dukat claims that he is not happy about having had his arm twisted into leaving the children behind.
Yes, and he specifically actually blames the civilian government for that, potentially explaining why he sets up a very specific circumstance that he is attempting to manipulate here. So,
do you believe that Dukat genuinely regrets leaving the children behind?
Yes.
I agree.
I do. I think Dukat regrets leaving them behind because Dukat is like the Cardassians' Cardassian. And his own fidelity to family ends up actually being a major plot point in DS9 moving forward. So because I know that, I know he means it. And so his actions make a degree of sense to me because he is bitter over this stain on his honor that he is responsible for, and setting up a circumstance where he humiliates the civilian decision maker that led to that makes a degree of sense for his machinations and his perspective.
Dukat seems like a pretty complicated character.
Oh, he is. The complications that Dukat is going to present as a character have only begun to manifest themselves.
Well, I'll tell you, I had enough two-dimensional, ambiguous bad guys of the day out of Enterprise. Like, that was really one of Enterprise's shortcomings, was that they couldn't make believable bad guys when they needed them.
Yeah, they only had villains of the week, and they were bad anyway.
Give me a Seska here. Maybe it's just a Cardassian thing. Cardassians make good bad guys, I guess.
Dukat is just right now. He is kind of an unknown presence. As he becomes a more regular fixture on the show and becomes something of a at times he'll be a protagonist. At times he's an anti-hero. Sometimes he's the straight up antagonist. It's kind of interesting how they don't ever commit to a single line with him until the end, and it makes you appreciate him more as a character as a consequence. This episode really boils down to one scene in sickbay when Dukat's having not Dukat, Garak is having his hand finally treated. He's getting the blinky lights put over him as you do in Star Trek.
He's getting the zombie cure so he doesn't start biting people himself.
And Bashir lets slip that Dukat has already contacted the station about Garak being attacked and how concerned he was, and mentioning, I didn't know you were friends. And then you have the most amazing response in the world from Garak, which is sustained laughter. It tells you so much in that moment, is to say, oh, these two have history, and it's not good. It's not good history at all. Because Garak is very entertained by the idea that somehow Dukat is concerned with his well-being. And this is where the speaking in italics really starts to show, because Garak does what he always does. And as Bashir points out rather sheepishly later on, he doesn't really say exactly what he thinks. He just asks a bunch of questions. Very good questions. And asks you to answer questions, them.
Yeah.
Just, hey, what's a trait that you would apply to Cardassians? Would it be attention to detail? Would a people who are known for their attention to detail leave a bunch of orphans behind on accident? Or would they have left them behind on purpose? And if they left them behind on purpose, who would have been responsible for having left them behind on purpose? You should think about these questions. That's all he really does, and yet that is really just his character writ large. He just shows up and tells Bashir things without telling him. Just like he did with the Duras sisters when they were making dirty deals for bombs and shit. Like, I'm not interested in painting the picture. I want you to figure it out for your fucking self.
I want you to build your own investment in this and come to your own conclusions to really lock you in on agency here. And that, that's really where things start taking off for me on this episode, is that hearty laugh and like, all right, these two are adversarial, and they're going to be able to influence the crew of Deep Space Nine in very different ways.
And it's also our first indication that Garak is not necessarily an agent of the Cardassian government. Because in his first appearance, he actually was helping the Starfleet crew figure out what's going on, but it was to serve the interests of the Cardassians in that same circumstance.
Yeah.
In this, it's, no, fuck Gul Dukat. Fuck everything Gul Dukat wants. Fuck everything Gul Dukat needs. I'm going to fuck his shit up. So clearly there's something else going on with this guy, that he's not a loyal agent of the Cardassian people. He's a guy that has his own agenda.
Sisko's got motivation. Oh, they sequester the son.
Yeah, there's an accusation from the Super Nintendo man that he, like, the Bajoran father's abusive, and Sisko was like, okay, I'm going to have Bruegel is the kid's name, stay with the O'Briens, and we're going to see what we can figure out what's going on here.
First of all, cartridge coat. Like Bashir catches him at the buffet or something.
No, at the Davos table.
Oh, that's
Quark's,
right. Where he's just kicking
Quark's limited amount of time in this episode is him bemoaning losing money to this guy as he gambles his ass off.
Who's just crushing it at Dabo, by the way. They get in close. This guy's head is disgusting. It looks like everything behind his eye line and the top of his head is just crusted over fungus. Really one of the most gross aliens I've seen out of Deep Space Nine up to this point. Nasty. But Julian kind of needles him, like, hey, I'm putting together a report on the hand bite and whatever. And the guy's kind of like, well, it's not my place to say. And Julian needles him a little bit more and finally turns and says, it's not fair how this kid's living. This guy who looks like some sort of, like, picture the crotchety old man pastor who's murdering people in the city and lives up in the hills. Like, that's what this guy's stepdad or foster parent looks like, right? Like real culty, crazy, fundamental vibes out of this guy. And he says enough keywords that it triggers a CPS response out of Starfleet. Do you think cartridge coat works for Dukat?
I have no doubt, given the result of the episode. It's all as a setup, right? It's all a setup to embarrass the actual father of the child in question. So making sure that it is known that this kid is on the station was probably Dukat's intention all along. The fact that this kid attacked Garak was probably an added bonus and made it easier to talk about what's going on. But it seemed to me the play that Dukat was after was get this guy who is apparently going to give work to the dad onto Deep Space Nine so there can be witnesses that this kid is around, so I can justify calling Cisco up and saying, what about this kid? Oh, by the way, he's in your jurisdiction. Oh, by the way, this guy's going to say that the father's abusive. Like, you can see that play piece by piece already on the table. Garak getting his hand bit was just basically a bonus.
The decision to put Rugal with the one guy who's probably killed the most Cardassians. Like, I think
by far the man who has killed the most Cardassians on the entire station.
The only person more
aside from Kira, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. That's like the only person I think that could have been more inappropriate is putting her with him. Like, all the Bajorans, who respect this religious, like,
couldn't give him to Odo.
Couldn't give him to
Quark.
To sex hologram at Quarks. Like, anybody would have been better than O'Brien, and I have to wonder if O'Brien's still on a secret shit list. Like, or hey, have him hang out in fucking Julian's quarters, right? The medical care person. No, we're going to put you up with our grease monkey who has a necklace of Cardassian ears. You guys will have a lot in common, and we're going to sit you down at the same dinner table, and I don't know, maybe you'll get stabbed in the throat. Like, I get the Kiko part. Okay, she's a school teacher, but like, you can't just give him his own room. Like,
I think it's a nice way to bring back into the chat, so to speak, O'Brien's racist attitudes. And they make a point of making that a bit of a plot here, where he comes back. He's a bit upset with Keiko that she allowed Rugal to play with his daughter. And he was very well behaved, very gentle, and all of that. And he says this great line. He says, "Gentle was bred out of Cardassians a long time ago."
Like they're pit bulls.
And Keiko, like, makes a point of getting his fucking face about that and say, that is really ugly and terrible racist thing you just said. Sit the fuck down, Miles.
Miles, how did you pass the psych screener to work on the flagship with a mouth like that?
Miles, how are you on a station literally bordering the Cardassian like empire?
Oh, I'm just here to kill people.
Thinking like that, man. Like, you're not a security risk with that attitude? Didn't your ex-CO just like go rogue and start murdering Cardassians in the demilitarized zone? Isn't that a thing that happened? But I like that he's just openly racist. I think that adds a lot here to say he's lived a life where Cardassians are assholes, so he's just prejudiced against them, even the kids. Even he's like, no, he's a rabid dog. We have to prepare to put him down. That's what he would think. So like having the guts to put that shit in his mouth, I think I like it. And because there's a storyline arc there too, where he is to curb it, he has to have conversations with the kid, he has conversations with the dad, where he's just gotta like, okay, maybe I need to think about what my wife just said about my prejudiced attitudes. Maybe I gotta try and connect with these people.
Also hold this in the same light as what was the episode where he like sat down to have a beer and the Cardassians are there, and then he's like, I don't hate you, I hate what you guys made me become, and this and that.
The Wounded, yeah.
It's a little step back from here. He hasn't really been having the opportunity to focus on his own inward growth because he's too busy fixing leaky faucets and replicators pumping the station full of poison.
Let's talk about a minute about another minor subplot in this episode, and that's the increasing annoyance that Death Row Sisko has with his chief medical officer.
Well, I want to say, first of all, kudos to Sisko for really toning it down. I found him to be extremely calm and reasonable this entire episode. I think he hit his limit break last episode where he beat the shit out of a Klingon with his bare hands. So he's charging his raised laser back up. We're going to get a couple episodes maybe of him like being normal.
But being normal, yet being very shitty towards Julian Bashir. Like,
somewhat
deservedly
menacing.
so. Like, he's got Dukat, Sisko's got Dukat on the line, and then Bashir shows up and starts asking a bunch of pointed questions about who's responsible for these orphans being left behind.
Very accusatory tone.
The commander's whole vibe with this guy, to the point where Sisko turns around and is like, okay, could you explain to me why you just made my life harder today? And he can't, because it's all based on conjecture that comes from a consequence from Garak. And he apologizes, and then Sisko lets loose a great line. Oh, don't apologize. The highlight of my day to watch Dukat like
squirm
on the television. Just never do it again.
And I'm watching, I'm like, all right, Julian, your line here is to be like, well, if it's such a sensitive conversation, why do you have this guy on speakerphone in front of the whole fucking office here? Like,
yeah, why weren't you doing this in your office, bro?
This is a you problem.
I'm a senior officer. I'm your chief medical officer. I'm allowed to have opinions about things. And then it's like coupled though with when for some reason Garak can just break into people's homes, wake them up.
What the fuck is happening there?
No comment. Just like, Garak, what's going on? Why are you here? Like, no, it's not important. We're going on an adventure together now. You and me. Together on an adventure. Let's go. Get your shit together.
Oh yeah, there's some Rick and Morty vibes here, right?
Yeah, there is. Oh my god, you're right. Bashir is Morty.
Yeah.
Oh jeez, Garak. I don't know if I want to go on a runabout.
Yeah. What? This is Tom Paris did this to Kim. Remember, Kim was like laying there with a face mask in the most unnatural sleeping position possible?
I believe he was also the same episode when Kim claimed he remembered being in the womb.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is just a Starfleet thing that, in Starfleet, you don't lock your door, even if you're in like the space ghetto.
So, because he didn't lock his door, apparently Garak just watches him sleep. Eventually decides to wake him up because he's got more breadcrumbs to put before him.
This is the same space station that was just dealing with Bajoran supremacists, the Circle. Are we to believe that the entirety of the Circle is completely disbanded? There's no vestiges, and there's nobody within the Circle who was just openly abducting people all over the place that would dare take revenge on the fact that the Circle was dismantled and the fate of Bajor put back into the terrible provisional government.
I prefer to think of it that just Garak just is too powerful for Doors to resist him. Like his aura as a successful spy
yeah,
just means like doors just unlock, right? Like we we're a Starfleet door. We have no power here.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do.
You have to guess the color of the door to bypass security. I don't doubt that Garak could get in. And if he did hack his way in, then it makes Julian even more unreasonable. If Julian just sleeps with his door unlocked, the idea of somebody standing next to his bed as he wakes up is a reasonable conclusion and one that he shouldn't flip out about. But if he did lock his door and the fucking station tailor is in there looking down at him, these guys are just too chill. He took too much Federation Prozac. I don't. It puts O'Brien going back into his child's bedroom and seeing Rumpelstiltskin monster standing there, like in the correct perspective. Like Starfleet does not care who's in the bedroom.
Another guy who apparently doesn't care who's in his bedroom is Sisko, because this scene cuts to Bashir having apparently woken his ass up. Sisko opening the door in his lovely lounge gear.
I mean, it's no Shang Tsung, but...
And saying, I need a runabout. And then once again, Sisko has the best, like, annoyed attitude with Bashir in this episode, where he just says, just go on. Okay, I'm listening. Tell me whatever this fucking story is that you want a goddamn runabout right now. Please. And he says it's Garak. It's like, okay, what about him? Where are you going? He won't tell me. Oh, is one runabout enough? Like, would you like two? This is it? This is all you got? And Bashir ends up getting bailed out by the fact that Gul Dukat is so just going so hard with his shtick of whatever this fucking game is that he is playing, that it becomes obvious that a game is being played, such that Sisko's like, okay, fine, go take the obvious spy and go do whatever the fuck it is that he wants to do, because apparently these two fucks hate each other and I'm going to be stuck in the middle of it all week. So please go solve this problem for me, Julian. I would love that.
By the way, I'm expressly forbidding you from raiding any Cardassian death camps. That's a Kieran Reese only thing, right?
I haven't had coffee yet. I don't have a pastry. I'm not at the Replomat. You're not in the voyeur vent.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly not acceptable. You have to stay within Bajoran space.
Well, that's a problem when you only have three. This is a 3-car family to be spread out among 700 people on this station. They go down. They're at the orphan camp. We find out that Garak is an amazing hacker and very familiar with software engineering. I love our records are broken. He's like, well, here, let me take a look at this real quick. And whatever this hacker eyepiece he has on, like Garak's like, you just happen to have this laying around. Like, yeah. You never know
when people need to hem your pants. You need to hem someone's pants.
Let the waist out.
Yeah.
And it's, Julian just continuing to learn why you don't ask this guy questions. They get the database, they go to DIP, and Garak is once again confronted with Cardassian children. And this is a pretty legit sad scene. And it also casts Rugal in an interesting light, because Rugal's whole thing is you're not my real dad. I'm sorry. My real dad is not my real dad. My adoptive father is the one that I care about. And I want to go home to my Bajoran home where I'm looked down on and spit on by society. And I'm basically being raised to hate myself.
But he's comfortable with hating himself. He's been left with the truth appears to be that he is well treated, but he has been raised as a self-hating Cardassian, and he is 100% bought into that propaganda. Not even that it's really propaganda. It's the truth.
Now, Garak, as he's leaving, sees other kids, and they do not look like they're having the best time in this orphanage. And the girl that comes out, like, excuse me, sir, are you here to take us home to Cardassia? And Garak's like, no, we're out.
I did like that the matron of this orphanage talked about how she was in the resistance, and then Garak says, oh, maybe we have met. Just another little, like, what's going on with this guy? What is his fucking history?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's no elaboration, none needed. That comment alone tells you what you need to know.
They get up on the runabout. Garak's setting up search protocols through this thing. Julian stops everything and says, "We're not going anywhere until you start giving me some answers."
And once again, what does Garak do? He speaks in italics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he lays out why this is happening. And that is, this is a political dispute between Dukat as a military leader and Rugel's father, who we then get to start knowing in the episode as a civilian political leader. Evidently, there's beef between the two because the civilian political leadership of Cardassia is who Garak believes is responsible for them deciding to leave. Or not Garak, Dukat. And as a consequence, Dukat wants to humiliate and eliminate this guy as a potential rival to him. And because of the Cardassian weight on the concept of family, the fact that Rugel's father accidentally abandoned his child on Bajor will serve as a major detriment against his political career and make Dukat's life that much easier. That's what this is all about. Rugel is essentially a pawn in this scheme, and this is about making sure Dukat doesn't get what he wants. Really, the kid's disposition is a bit secondary relative to that. I have a question for you, Peter.
Yes.
This is the first episode of DS9 where I felt like this could have been a TNG episode. You know, the Enterprise could have wound up in orbit of Bajor and having to settle the same dispute for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's also an episode where if it was a TNG episode, the resolution would have been entirely different.
What's your question?
What do you think that the resolution would have been if this were a TNG episode? What if Picard had to make this choice instead of Sisko?
They would have left Rugel with the Bajorans because that's where he wanted to be.
Precisely. Exactly correct. I completely agree.
I noticed that, and this is an ongoing theme that we've joked about, that the moral consequences of the hero's actions are completely downplayed and mentioned as a outbound note. The last time being when they cloned a guy. And it was like, wow, this would have been the whole thrust of an episode if you've just created life where you should not have. And, what are you going to do with this? Blah, blah, blah. Hey, here's this kid who has clear, even, if you're going to compare it against TNG, O'Brien has this conversation with this kid and he's like, well, what do you want? And this is like a very TNG moment with an Enterprise crew member. What do you want? This isn't just about what the grown-ups want. You tell Sisko what you want because you're important as a person. No, you're not. There's bigger wheels turning and nobody gives a shit about you. You're going to be well taken care of either way. And the focus of what the story we are telling about is political and not humanitarian, even though it has a humanitarian wrapper around it. So things get complicated. Rugel's real dad shows up. He very clearly wants his child back for loving
personal
reasons.
And political reasons, we'll say. He definitely has a personal reasons. He's definitely regrets leaving him behind, but also he has this like civilizational burden that he's responsible for because he left his child behind. Like that's so extremely frowned upon.
Even though he was set up, like Dukat apparently bombed this guy's house. It killed his wife, and they kidnapped his kid and took him to an orphanage. And he fucked this dude's family. This is some vicious ass shit.
Yes.
And I think the fact that at no point does Rugel's dad like flip out and deck Dukat and be like, you motherfucker, you killed my wife. Or, I mean, maybe it was a legit Bajoran bombing and somehow Dukat's people got in there first and took the kid out.
Never clarified in the episode. What we know that Dukat is responsible for is he set a subordinate officer to place Rugel at an orphanage such that he would get adopted and the circumstance could present itself in an opportune time.
4D chess, by the way. Hats off, Dukat.
Yeah, but we don't know if Dukat actually committed the act of terrorism or not. He could have. But if he did or didn't, almost doesn't matter. It matters, I guess, to a degree of the level of monstrosity that the episode watcher might really understand Dukat's capable of. But either way, he definitely set up Rugal to be adopted by Bajorans so that he could pop this out when it was advantageous to him to try and eliminate a political rival. And he becomes very close to doing so until, you know, Garak and Bashir show up and shit all over his plan with a very awkward gotcha scene. I'd say like the end of this episode is got a little bit of that rushed element to it.
I like their mutual agreement between Rugal's real dad and his adopted dad, where both of them acknowledge Sisko as a reasonable, neutral third party.
Yeah, they actually both immediately take to that without objection.
Not enough room in the script for there to be additional conflict.
Well, and the fact that the Cardassian dad in particular is like, no, you're a father. You are suitable to make this decision. Only you really can. And I like that a lot for putting Sisko in that position because of his character background, but ultimately he's very passive actually in this role. The episode resolves itself around Garak and Bashir figuring out the puzzle of how it is that this kid who should have died in a terrorist bombing suddenly got adopted by Bajoran parents. And then really the episode ends at that moment, right? Like it 5 minutes later, it's all over.
I love that this is all enabled through the database that they harvested. And I love this reoccurring theme that like everything else you can say about the Cardassians, like if the Ferengi are the galaxy's businessmen, exploitive businessmen, like the Cardassians are just meticulous record keepers,
like
that
Germans.
teach. Like what?
Like the Germans. Just keep records of all of your monstrosities, so I'm sure we'll come back to bite you.
Just fun little attention to detail there. It's a messy episode in terms of the moral complications there. So as they're sitting in the room, you got both the fathers, Sisko, O'Brien, Dukat's there, and Julian comes in later on, and then you also have the kids sitting there. And there's no clear right answer in this, because I would say it's effectively disproven that the child has been abused or any of the stuff that the businessman claimed was actually legit. The true biological father is motivated both through a sense of duty and honor, and also a deep-rooted sadness that this is the only chance he has to have a taste of his old life. You've got these very religious Bajorans who found it within their hearts to bring this kid in and raise him and feed him and clothe him and blah, 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 blah. So, like, what's the right choice here? And like you're saying, they speed completely through the implications of this kid being ripped away from where he wants to be. This is a Next Gen episode. It's the one where the Admiral's son, the Lady Admiral's son, is picked up by some hunter culture, remember? The kid with his hair slicked back?
Vaguely, yeah.
I think, doesn't he end up stabbing Picard or something?
Yeah, they have a very difficult relationship with each other as he tries to basically teach him how to be human.
So it's that, but it just focuses on the intricate politics instead. They hit the end of the episode. I'm again asking myself why this non-commissioned O'Brien guy continues to be linchpin in every major diplomatic dealing on the station.
It's just the everyman. People like him. They want to hang out with him.
Even if he's killed many of them. Again, Sisko, get on the phone and get a fucking counselor or some sort of social worker.
Someone with blue on their shoulder pads ASAP to deal with these situations. You need a diplomat.
Yeah, this is an ongoing issue for you, sir. All right. Sisko decides to give the kid back. Oh, they first of all, Julian shows up and ahas Dukat hard.
Oh yeah. Dukat gets rolled out of this circumstance. Like his culpability in knowing that Rugal was alive, sending a subordinate to place him in an orphanage, and then like springing this shit the moment it became advantageous for him to do so. That's all laid out very clearly, very cleanly. You can follow it. And it really ends with Bashir having figured it out the game before it could be completely played, and humiliating him enough that he has to just kind of walk away. But yet, Dukat gets what he wants, kind of. Because apparently Cisco rules in favor of the kid going back to the Cardassian dad on the basis that he shouldn't have actually been placed in foster care to begin with. His father's alive.
I could have gone for a scene where the Bajoran father watches all of this happen and understands that, like, the kid's been fucked over and kind of goes, all right, here's your dad. Like, you belong with your parent. Here could have been a scene where he's like, I don't want to. You belong with us. You see how terrible your people really are. You got one of your own potentially killing this guy's wife and throwing you into a fucking orphanage and using you as a political pawn to stab at your dad. And the kid really not wanting to go home because, he's, again, front row seats to how terrible these people are. There's neither of that. It's all swept under the rug. And the biggest meaningful resolution point that I got out of that was Rugal about to go off on the ship home with his father while Cisco's like, well, that really sucked. And, at least you got your kid back. And the guy's like, I'm so indebted to you for giving me my son. And Cisco's like, hey, there's a lot of our orphans down there. It'd be real swell if, like, you can have more of these homecomings. And the guy's like, so anyways, I'm out of here. See ya. Like, real dick vibes at the end of that guy. And it should have left Cisco being like, maybe I made the wrong choice on that one. Meanwhile, O'Brien's over there like, you ever want to come back? You call me on the space phone and I'm going to tell you a lie that you can come back whenever you want. And Rugal getting on the ship, not wanting to speak with his biological father.
So there's one last scene before the episode wraps. And it really is just another, this is who Garak is, when he just decides to finally explain to Julian, like, I don't tell you things because it's more interesting for me to watch you figure it out. Right? Like, it's more entertaining. It's more interesting. Why would I tell you why I hate Dukat? Shouldn't you figure it out for yourself? Haven't I given you clues? It's almost like he's talking to the audience of like, stop asking me for my subtext to become text. Enjoy the subtext. Figure it out. Some of this will remain ambiguous. That's okay. And he just walks away. Julian's just left like, okay, I guess there is a point to this. Like, it is more entertaining for us to go on wacky adventures when you're breaking into my home so we can go to Bajor and steal computer records.
Thanks for making me so appealing to Section 31.
Yeah, I'm sure that won't come back to bite me in the ass. I'm sure my relationship with a clandestine agent will somehow influence the rest of my character development in any way.
Do you think that Garak was just an instant fan favorite?
Yes, absolutely. And I know that because, frankly, they talk about that in the Memory Alpha. Ira Stephen Bear has a quote in here. I'll just go ahead and read it. About Garak as a character. I didn't have a lot of faith in this show at first. It was such an issue-oriented show that I thought it would oversimplify a complicated issue. But what got me into the show was I realized that it was not only a chance to bring back Garak, but to do this whole weird little number with what was going on between him and Dukat. For me, that nailed the character, and I knew that after that happened, we were going to see a lot of Andy Robinson, who had become quite popular on staff. So Andy Robinson, the guy who plays Garak, was popular. Garak as a character started to take off here. Like, it all started to click. Like, this is a guy that we could really use to add a lot of color to this show, and we should do that.
Wonderful. Any closing thoughts?
Sloppy ending. The aha moment was just kind of rough. Cisco's decision to give the kid back to his original father makes sense simply because he should never have been separated him to begin with.
Mm.
I think that you are correct that Picard would have made the alternate choice because it would have been on a different decision axis. And I find that very interesting. You know, Picard's not a father. Picard would have viewed this from a humanitarian perspective in a different way. Whereas Sisko, because he's a father, he knows what's been taken from the original Cardassian dad and decides to restore it. And I think that that's worth noting here as part of the resolution of the episode.
Yeah, Bajoran Dad, your problem is you have the charisma of the guy in the Quaker Oats box. So you and your Puritan vibe are going home sunless. Thanks for visiting Deep Space Nine. Can't wait to have you visit again. You stink of the circle, and I remember what you did. Was it you who blew up my school? No sun for you. All right, moving out of here, going into the next episode, episode 6 of season 2, Meloria. I see Bashir in some very high ceiling room with I don't know, the Baron's daughter of House Harkonnen floating around the room. Dr. Bashir ends up falling in love with a new officer when he develops a way for her to function in a high-gravity environment. Meanwhile, Quark receives a death threat from one of his former associates. Who, his brother? This guy's got enough people trying to kill him already, man.
This one is a bit of a turkey, in my opinion, just because there's not much to it after. I don't know. I honestly think I may have skipped this episode a lot in some of my rewatches just because I found it uninteresting. So I might stand with a different opinion after we watch it again for this. I'm looking forward to analyzing this one. So thank you so much to everyone for listening. V'ger, please. We really appreciate the increased participation that we've seen recently in all of our media. So please reach out to us at v'gerplease@gmail.com. You can always follow us on Twitter and DM me at v'gerplease on X/Twitter. And as we mentioned, we do have a Patreon, www.patreon.com/v'gerplease. Come take a look. Plenty of content there for you to enjoy. See you next week.